I love bringing new life to forgotten toys. Man, it's so hard to believe that it's been 6 decades that toys have been a part of my life. But when did it all start? Fellow dorks and dorkettes, and welcome to Nostalgia Syndrome. My name is Rob, and in this episode we are embarking on a brand new decade of forgotten toys. We are taking a look at the 70s. Now, our timeline of toys, if you're around my age, began in the 70s, so it makes complete sense. It's not like I have enough on my plate already dealing with the 80s and 90s, but I wanted to give some love to where it all began for us, the 70s. Now, coming up in a future monthly theme, we will be taking a look at the 70s for a complete month. So I thought, let's do a dry run of the 70s and see how well it goes. Usually when I kick these off, I start with fantasy, but the 70s were not good for fantasy. But they were very good for sci-fi toys. So we will be taking a look at 5 forgotten 70s sci-fi toys. So, without further ado, let's get to number 1. Our first forgotten sci-fi toy from the 70s is actually from a syndicated TV show that ran from 1977 to 1979. And, oddly enough, this toy line has direct ties to G.I. Joe. This is Space Academy, made by Hasbro in 1977. There were 4 figures in total, and they also had some clothing options that you could buy separately to spruce up your Space Academy figures. Now, like I mentioned, this toy line has a direct tie to G.I. Joe. That is because Hasbro reused the Super Joe bodies, just with new heads that looked like the actors portraying the characters. Now, the Space Academy figures were only sold exclusively at Woolworth stores, and unfortunately, the toy line didn't go as long as the show did. The show lasted 2 seasons, but there was only 1 wave of figures released. Now, I don't know if I'll get hit with a copyright violation for this, but here's the original intro to Space Academy from 1977. Now, our next science fiction inspired toy comes from Ideal, again in the year 1977. This is Electroman. And Electroman came with cutting edge technology that directly inspired some big toys from the 80s. He was capable of shooting a stun beam out to attack his foe, Grog. He also came with motion-activated sounds. If you were to go into his line of sight, he would signal an alarm, and once the coast is clear, he gave the signal that the coast was clear. Now, Electroman had his stun beam that could affect the Grog figure, but you could also buy a stun blaster that you could play with Grog without Electroman. It would produce the same results, just you would be doing the shooting instead of Electroman. Like I mentioned, there were a couple toy lines in the 80s that were inspired by this technology. You had Brave Star, you had Captain Power, and there were others that utilized the stun beam technology.
This is Electroman, the action figure with powers of light and sound. When you put Electroman on guard, he'll sound a warning if anyone sneaks up on him.
Is it Zog? Radar on. It's Zog! You won't escape us this time. Stun ray on. Wow!
Each figure requires 3 batteries not included. Electroman comes with 2 reflector badges. Zog sold separately from Ideal.
Now, a Forgotten Toys episode wouldn't be the same without a look at some heavily inspired toy lines. You know what I mean. And the 70s were no exception. Now, it was kind of odd, some of the properties that got the heavily inspired treatment, and this was one of them. Heavily inspired by Planet of the Apes are Astro Apes. Released by United Manufacturing in an unknown year. Now, these 8-inch Mego-inspired Astro Ape figures look like they were made from discarded molds from the Mego line. Their names were even heavily inspired by the characters in the TV show and movies. You had Artemis, Dr. Zorma, Myra, and Warrior Ape. And these are what I would consider a true knockoff, because they are actually using molds and repurposing them for their own financial gain. How much gain they had, I have no idea. Probably not that much, since Astro Apes isn't on the lips of every collector. But yeah, there's a big distinction between knockoffs and inspired, and this is definitely a knockoff. And you know, I don't use those words very lightly. Our next Forgotten 70s sci-fi toy is Pulsar, released by Mattel in 1976. And as the package says, Pulsar is the ultimate man of adventure. No mission is impossible for him. Now, what really set Pulsar apart from a lot of other toys was, once you disrobed him, he had a translucent body. You push a button on his back and his heart beat, his lungs breathe, and blood pumps through his veins. You could also lift up his faceplate and insert mission discs into his cranium. Now, the one thing that I absolutely adore about this figure is the packaging. I mean, how psychedelic can you get? I love the colors, I love the zigzaggy patterns. It's a real far out mind trip, and I enjoy it. Now, the ultimate man of adventure needs a grand villain, and that's when Hypnos steps in. Hypnos was again another translucent alien figure that had a spinning disc within his chest. He also had a removable helmet that you could see his alien visage. Now, these were the only 2 figures released into the Pulsar line, but they also had a playset, which we'll talk about in a future installment, because if we're going to talk about the 70s, we're going to have to talk about those forgotten playsets as well.
It's Pulsar, the ultimate man of adventure. You energize his heart, lungs, and body fluid into pulsating action. Then load a mission disc into his brain. Imagine you make his heart beat for land adventures, his lungs pump for high-altitude missions. Pulsar, imagine you energize him for exciting feats of strength. Pulsar, the ultimate man of adventure, new from Mattel.
For our 5th and final Forgotten 70s sci-fi toy, I have definitely saved the best for last. These action figures were made by Atlantic in 1978, and they were simply called Atlantic Galaxy. There were 4 figures in total, 1 hero and 3 aliens. Now, I don't know if the aliens were good or bad, I'm not one to judge, but Skyman was definitely a hero. Or the roles could be reversed and he's an alien in their galaxy and he's the bad guy. Anyway, now these figures had very limited posability, but what they lack in posability, they make up for with personality. These aliens, we'll start with them. have names like Dynation, Humbot, and Zefton. All of them featured different accessories like laser guns, detectors, things like that. I'm sorry? Folks, this just in. There were actually more than 4 figures in this toy line. And when you add in that there were different color variations, there were a lot of figures in this toy line. Not only was there Sky Man, but there was Sky Girl. And they actually had some vehicles, which we'll get to in a 70s Rad Ride video sometime in the future. But they also had playsets, again, that we'll talk about in a future installment of 70s playsets. This European toy line originated in Italy, but quickly grew throughout Europe, and you have German versions and French versions and the like. I can't believe it. With the late breaking news that I got, I forgot to even talk about Sky Man. But him and Sky Girl with their Sky Baby were the heroes of the story. And, I mean, he had a removable helmet, a jetpack, very Adam Strange-like, the DC Comics character. So, I think I give it extra points for that. Okay, folks, this was the very first episode of Forgotten 70s Toys. We took a look at the science fiction toys of the 70s, and believe me, there are plenty more. We took a look at a little bit of everything. We got some big hitters like Hasbro and Marvel. We had some knockoffs, yeah, I'm saying the word. And we had some really awesome European releases. No matter what decade you're in, toys, yeah, they're everywhere, and they bring enjoyment to kids and adults worldwide. And like I said, 6 decades, and I'm sure a lot of you out there are the same. I mean, we look at it, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, the 210s, and the 220s. That's 6 decades. Man, we ain't that old, but that sounds old. And you're only as old as you feel. So, we'll leave it at that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I am treading on territory I have not walked upon before, so I felt a little off talking about 70s toys. I know, I shouldn't, because we talk about 80s and 90s, but I'm kind of flying completely blind with these toys. And I think that's exciting and very fun, so I hope you had fun along with me. Anyway, I think I've talked long enough, so I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everyone. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this, or any of the episodes that YouTube is recommending down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you will be notified whenever there's a new episode. So anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad, and stay dorky.